It's time for the conclusion to the story of Caesar, or as Benny affectionately referred to him as, Baldy. Sit back, grab your popcorn, and get comfy, because this is a nice one.
They played at war, raiding each other, a little rape and pillage here, a little ransoming there. I showed them total warfare.
In the early days of the Legion, Caesar hadn't spent much time on the cultural identity of his new nation, deciding to focus exclusively on their military abilities. You can't really blame him, considering when he arrived there were 7 tribes at war with the kidnappers. For a short time, this was great for them. Caesar conquered tribe after tribe, gained more resources, land, and slaves. After a year of leading these segmented and previously hostile tribes under one banner, Caesar began to realize that he needed to make a serious change. He quickly sought out a long-term plan to assimilate every individual under the newly formed Legion banner, under one name, one identity, and one culture, making his soldiers fiercely loyal to him. Another trick from his old pal, Julius Caesar's playbook.
That's right. Decades of warfare, absorbing lesser tribes, gathering power, forging the dross into a vast, razor-sharp scythe. My Legion's expansion has never ceased. Much of the Utah and Colorado and all of Arizona and New Mexico are mine.
The first step to uniting this tribe was to crown himself Caesar. Duh, what else was he supposed to do first? Okay, seriously though, the first real step was to remove any and all individualistic features used by the separate tribes. This meant no hairstyles, face paints, piercings, etc. The next step was for him to confiscate and burn all the unique uniforms from the former tribes, and create a new, unified uniform for his new people. Fun fact, Caesar would come across an old school, the University of Arizona, and would convert their large stock of football equipment the Legion using at the Battle of Hoover Dam, styling it after the legionary armor of ancient Rome. As the final step in his goal of assimilation, he would forcefully strip these tribes of the last of their culture by banning their old tribal languages, instead opting to teach the tribes their version of modern English. The final step was an important one for Caesar, as he had always resented having to study and learn these underdeveloped languages. He would elaborate further, making his thoughts on these languages abundantly clear.
If you think it's worthwhile to make smart people learn how to talk like backward savages, you're a follower of the apocalypse, or an idiot.
Stay classy, Caesar. The main reason for this aggressive push for change was to create a unified culture among his people, formed around Roman ideals. Caesar himself discussed further why he chose Roman culture and the idea of Pax Romana specifically.
I used Imperial Rome as the model for my Legion precisely because it was so foreign, so alien.
After conquering large chunks of Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado, Caesar decided it was time to end their nomadic ways, settling in their new capital by the name of Flagstaff, a real city located in Arizona. By the year of 2255, the Legion had fully settled into the new capital, finally having a single place to call home. Once everything had been situated on the home front, Caesar began to turn his eyes outwards, towards other large nations he could trade with, or more likely conquer and assimilate. This, my friends, leads me to the long-awaited entrance of the NCR. The NCR was formed in 2189 by a small town, Shady Sands, in California, which managed to, through diplomacy and war, expanded their territory from the top of California down to the Mexican Baja Peninsula. In 2274, NCR President Kimball ordered the occupation of the Mojave Wasteland and the repair of the Hoover Dam, pushing their territory up to the Colorado River. Jumping back to Caesar, while the NCR was busy at work, he was also expanding his territory, pushing his borders to the Colorado River. That means at multiple points on the river, the two expansionist nations were now sharing a land border. Never seeing another nation as advanced as the NCR, Caesar wasn't able to declare war on them like he had with the rest of his tribes. He decided on sending an envoy, Calhoun, an original member of the expedition into NCR territory, to, as Vulpes and Colta would put it,
I want you to teach everyone you meet the lesson that Caesar's Legion taught here. especially any NCR troops you run across.
and serve as a warning to NCR leaders, not to interfere with Caesar's grand plans. Little did Calhoun know he would be the only survivor of the expedition. After his departure for the west, all other remaining survivors would be executed under the orders of the new emperor. The NCR, being the NCR, didn't take too kindly to these open threats. They weren't about to be intimidated by a backwards, technologically irrelevant nation like the Legion. This would cause the Republic to quickly funnel their forces from across the nation into the Mojave Wasteland, while also fortifying all shared land borders across the Colorado River. While the NCR and their forces began a large buildup along the border, the Legion and their forces began a large buildup along the border as well, mainly focused on their main objective, the massive and functional Hoover Dam. At this point, you might be thinking to yourself, why doesn't Caesar just grow his nation east, conquering more tribes instead of taking on this massive risk? Well, the answer to that is very, very simple and can be summed up in about 3 words: ego-fueled delusion. Salo, being the Julius Caesar simp that he was, saw the conflict against the NCR as a continuation of Julius's march on Rome after his conquest of Gaul.
No, I'll destroy it because it's inevitable that it be destroyed. It's Hegelian dialectics, not personal animosity. How do I put this basically enough? It's a philosophical theory, the kind you might encounter if you took time to read some books. The fundamental premise is to envision history as a sequence of dialectical conflicts. Each dialectic begins with a proposition, a thesis, which inherently contains or creates its opposite, an antithesis. Thesis and antithesis. The conflict is inevitable, but the resolution of the conflict yields something new, a synthesis, eliminating the flaws in each, leaving behind common elements and ideas. The bombs wiped the slate clean. Human civilization descended to a level of ignorance that effectively set our cultural progress back to zero. The NCR has all the problems of the ancient Roman Republic: extreme bureaucracy, corruption, extensive senatorial infighting. Just as with the ancient Republic, it is natural that a military force should conquer and transform the NCR into a military dictatorship. Thesis and antithesis. The Colorado River is my Rubicon. The NCR Council will be eradicated, but the new synthesis will change the Legion as well, from a basically nomadic army to a standing military force that protects its citizens and the power of its dictator.
You see, Caesar saw his current empire as a reincarnation of the Roman nation of old, and would compare every one of his achievements to a moment in Julius Caesar's life. The tribes that were conquered in the Midwest were the tribes of Gaul. The Colorado River is his Rubicon, and the crossing of Hoover Dam will be his Battle of the Rubicon. While on the other side of the river, he saw Vegas as his Rome, a great and advanced capital for his new nation, and the NCR was the corrupt, bloated Roman Senate guarding their prized possession. This obviously wasn't the case in reality, as the NCR can barely even enter Vegas, let alone control it. That land is owned by the ever-constant Robert Edwin House, CEO and sole proprietor of the New Vegas Strip. And even if the NCR fell, House wouldn't make it easy to take his mighty city. Regardless of who owned it, Caesar was going to take the City of Lights for himself and make it his new capital. The year is 2276. The Legion have been poking and prodding at the two-headed bear for months, forcing small engagements along their shared border, with the most notable of those being the destruction of Fort Aradesh in the eastern portion of the Republic. Within a year, Caesar and his Legion will be at war with the NCR, culminating in the famous and disastrous First Battle of Hoover Dam, where the Legion would face their first major defeat since the formation of their empire, which, as you will see, was a hard adjustment. In 2277, the attack on the Hoover Dam would commence by the Legion's hand. The obsession with the dam was a controversial topic within the higher ranks of the Legion, with even the Frumentari who discovered the structure, Ulysses, being strongly opposed to the war, so much that he would actually leave the Legion. The assault would be led by Joshua Graham, the Mormon missionary who had followed Caesar's every move since the original tribal war. Joshua and his army would march on the dam, which had been garrisoned by the NCR forces. Initially, they were successful in their attempts to push into the dam, only being stopped by a reinforced defensive line commanded by NCR General Oliver Lee's troopers further back in their defenses. This initially didn't faze Joshua, but he would quickly begin to realize that this was the NCR's plan all along. Without any warning, the snipers of the 1st Recon Marksman Unit would begin aggressively opening fire on the Legion commanders and higher-ups, managing to pick off many of them. The lack of leadership had caused major disorganization, confusion, and chaos within the lower ranks. The Legion command structure, being as rigid as it is, doesn't have the ability to adapt heavy losses on the battlefield. It's not a problem they've ever had before, so they've never adjusted their tactics for it. Basically, the Legion has one mode, and that's go forward. After suffering heavy losses, Joshua would order his troops to charge as a desperate attempt to break through the defensive line. He believed that if he and his troops can catch up to the snipers picking off his commanders, they'd have a better chance at sieging the rest of the dam's relatively untouched defenses. Again, this seemed to start off with tons of momentum, allowing his more experienced forces to break into the NCR defensive line, beginning to chase down the recon units in the back lines. This sudden breakthrough would force the NCR Rangers and 1st Recon units to retreat back in the town of Boulder, while the troopers under General Oliver would attempt to slow down the invaders, buying as much time as possible. Soon, though, the Legion troops would swarm the city, entering by the thousands, with most of their experienced forces leading the charge. The town of Boulder, which is located just at the entrance of the western side of the dam, prior to the war, was a staging post for the NCR military infrastructure units. In preparation for the war, he had evacuated all the citizens, infrastructure, and military personnel. Expecting their defenses to be overwhelmed on the dam, the Army engineers had rigged the entire city of Boulder with explosives, preparing a welcoming party for their new adversaries. After the dust had settled, the NCR would engage in a counterattack on the newly decimated Legion army, forcing Joshua and his forces to retreat back to the eastern side of the Colorado, completely losing all their new territory that so many had fought and died for. And that was that. The first battle of Hoover Dam was over. This being the first big failure for the Legion caused Caesar to go into a blind rage. His first order was to have the general who led the assault and one of his most loyal followers, Joshua Graham, punished for his failures. He ordered the man to be covered in pitch, lit on fire, and thrown in the Great Pit where it all started, the Grand Canyon. Caesar would use him as an example for the rest of his army of what happens when you fail the Legion. Joshua Graham would be replaced by the legate Lanius, an absolute monster of a man who had murdered most of his own tribe before promptly being adopted into the Legion as Caesar's right-hand man. Lanius would proceed to do what many in the Legion had hoped for. He pushed eastwards, away from the NCR, and conquered dozens of new tribes, assimilating them into the Legion as a whole. This would all be in preparation for Caesar's planned Second Battle of Hoover Dam, where he would throw the entire strength of the Legion at their rivals in order to conquer not just the dam, but the entire Mojave wasteland. At the same time, there had been a noticeable decline of Caesar's health in the months leading up to the second assault of the NCR, losing a significant amount of weight, causing his face to sink inwards. It would turn out that Caesar has a brain tumor, and due to his society's lack of medical knowledge, his only hope for surgery would be finding an outsider who has the knowledge and parts to repair his autodoc. No matter how much he prepares for the fight, the final fate of this contested land would be decided by one man, a single spark in the absolute powder keg that is the Mojave, the Courier 6. The same Courier 6 who was tasked with the delivery of the platinum chip to Mr. House, and who had, if unintentionally, brought Hopeville to their knees following an underground atomic detonation which would gain him a lifelong enemy. If you want to find out how this story ends, I guess you'll just have to fill the shoes of the courier and experience the intense conflict for yourself.
You got what you were after, so pay up.
You're crying in the rain, Pally.
Guess who's waking up over here?
Time to cash out.
Will you get it over with?
Maybe cons kill people without looking them in the face. But I ain't a fink. Dig? You've made your last delivery, kid. Sorry you got twisted up in this scene. From where you're kneeling must seem like an 18-carat run of bad luck. Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.